Hello, everybody. So, a few months ago, I took the decision to come off the antipsychotic medication that I've been, in essence, forced to take by mental health services. The reason I've come off antipsychotic medication is for the same reason that I always come off antipsychotic medication, because it does absolutely nothing to help my condition and very likely hinders it and makes my condition worse. I find the feeling of being on antipsychotics torturous. It's a horrifying experience. And I'm reading the book Animals in Translation by Temple Grandin and Katherine Johnson, where she's talking about the effects of dopamine within the brain. And this is what antipsychotics do. They bind to dopamine receptors, so they interrupt the brain's dopamine pathways. And the role that dopamine was thought to play in the brain, and this is what psychiatry would probably assert, but it's part of the pleasure and reward system of the brain. Because psychiatry is always a bazillion years behind when it comes to the science. But really, what the sort of pathway or what it's involved with is more like the curiosity pathway of the brain. And this is what I'm reading now in Temple Grandin's book. And she's discussing sort of the differences between animal and human brains and the similarity between, say, our sort of seeking behaviors, our curiosity behaviors. And this is one of the reasons I will not take antipsychotics in the future, or I will not adhere to a course of antipsychotic medication, which in the minds of psychiatrists, they want you to be on this stuff for years and years, your entire life possibly. Because when on antipsychotics, I lose the ability to read, or I lose the ability to concentrate on what I'm reading, or more critically, I lose the ability to be curious enough to pick up a book and read it. Whereas when I'm off medication, I can read 50, 60 pages in a single sitting. I can inhale books, which, is more like what I used to be like before all this mental health nonsense entered my life. And like the feeling of being off medication is just like being a bit more back to normal, and being a little bit more myself, I think. Being a little bit more in touch with my emotions also, and just being a bit more actually grounded and stable, and in a general sense, having a better mood for one thing. And being more curious and being more engaged in the activities that I undertake in life, and being more creative also, and various other things. And it helps me as a writer also. I've noticed that once the effects of antipsychotic medication have sort of worn off, I can write to a high level of proficiency than I can when I'm on the medication. So that doesn't help at all, being on meds, particularly if I want to pursue a career as a writer. Then being off meds is actually essential for that. So I don't need them in my life at all. Furthermore, I think any insistence that I ought to be on medication really amounts to sort of an attack on two fronts: an attack on my freedom of expression and an attack on my right to the freedom of belief and my freedom of conscience. Since one of the assertions that psychiatrists like to make, particularly about events in my past, I believe that I was involved on the periphery of some sort of conspiracy, and a conspiracy involving people in government. So that's a sort of political belief, really, and they have no right to sort of try and medicate me out of that ostensible delusion, which isn't really a delusion at all, of course, because it's not contradicted by incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, which is something else they sort of flatly walk over in their own attempts to diagnose. Oh, a delusion is just not it's just something that not everyone believes. That's more like a workable definition of the term heresy, I think. When you're believing things that not everyone would believe. So, there was a time in the not so distant past when not everyone would believe in Darwin's theory of evolution. In fact, the overwhelming majority of people didn't, and they probably would have loved to assert that he was crazy, and so on and so forth. And this has happened to various other thinkers throughout history. And then we have also examples of people in the present, such as David Icke, who most people I think would regard as a total crackpot, a crazy type. He was out there bravely writing books about conspiracies and involvement of ancient bloodlines and the Masons and the City of London Corporation, all these sorts of people in manufacturing global events to suit their own nefarious purposes and whatnot. And that's the sort of thing that comes across as very crazy, I think. But in my case, you actually have people within departments of, say, adult health and social care behind the scenes, conspicuously, as well as police officers who, I believe, either were part of a conspiracy to murder me at University of East Anglia, or were certainly involved in the covering up of that conspiracy. So yeah, it's still something I believe. And I believe that in spite of being on the medications, and it sort of achieves its end of coercing and bullying me into silence, which is, I think, what psychiatry would really want. Which is, it does nothing, for the real deep trauma and insanity caused by that trauma in my own brain or mind, if you like. It just covers it up. And then I get this incredibly annoying phenomena of people like my mum, who they like to say, "Oh, I notice a difference when you're on medication versus when you're off medication," and they don't at all. Or they say, "Oh, I noticed something at Christmas," like in retrospect. Well, why didn't you mention it at the time then? And so on. And she only believes that because these